You can go ahead, John.
Thank you. And the year-over-year July claim volume was slightly lower, although payments are trending up with increased average claim duration and a higher maximum benefit rate. This slide shows July claims by leave reason and as a percentage of total claims filed. There's also another slide upcoming that does show the decrease in the percentage of bonding claims slightly, as expected when the pregnancy and bonding claims were combined. And this slide represents year-to-date cumulative claims by leave reason and with percentages filed by gender. One thing to note here is that with changes made in the streamlining of pregnancy and bonding into a single case for females under pregnancy claim, there's been a significant increase in the number of male versus female bonding cases. So you can see that percentage of male versus female bonding cases there changing pretty significantly since that change was instituted in March. And this slide shows some more detail. The data shows that with pregnancy and bonding cases streamlined into one case, female bonding cases have decreased as expected, while pregnancy cases have remained relatively constant. Actual monthly claim numbers and each category's percentage of total monthly claim intake is also shown. Customer feedback has been very positive on the streamlined process. Survey comments such as very easy process and very helpful during pregnancy. Other comments, very helpful for parents of a newborn. The process change has resulted in shorter processing and payment timelines for those claims. And a pilot for proof of concept is in early planning stages to process bonding claims as a companion claim. This effort would coordinate the related pregnancy claim, the related pregnancy claims existing documentation with the bonding claim to streamline the bonding claim and reduce processing times, as most of the documentation required for the bonding claim already resides in the pregnancy case. In many bonding cases, this could potentially reduce customer filing requirements to making application, providing ID, and obtaining an employment verification. So it would substantially streamline that bonding case. And there are some efforts underway at this point to develop a pilot for that process. And on this slide, you can see the bonding claims filed by month, shows the expected trend of reduced total number of bonding cases, while the ratio of male to female cases has increased from 44% in January to 85% in July. So you can see the substantial change and shift in the data there with regard to male versus female claims for bonding. Later this month, AFLAC will implement optional race and ethnicity questionnaire on claim intake. This will enable us to evaluate and report on this additional demographic information at the claims level when reporting claim statistics. And the 3-month decision trend for adjudicated claims here, approved claims for the May through July period totaling almost 15,000, with an approval rate increasing to 70.73%. Denied claims at 5,966 with a denial rate of 29.27%. And the cumulative statistics below show over 94,000 approved claims cumulatively at a slightly lower approval rate and 42,000 denied claims with a slightly higher denial rate. These figures now include all of the large number of COVID claims that were received in the first quarter of 22. So that's a complete number with all claims adjudicated considered there. And on this slide, we have approved insights, the cumulative gross payments through July 2023. Payment all payment categories saw a significant increase in the year-over-year comparison. Average claim duration has increased slightly year-to-date 2023 compared to 2022, which was expected as pregnancy case duration increased by absorbing the associated bonding time. One thing to note is that a new maximum benefit rate went into effect on June 1st to a maximum of $900 per week due to the increase in the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So you can see the difference in the year-to-date 2022 payments versus the year-to-date 2023 payments, and then the cumulative payments altogether. And at this point, through the end of July, we are at 433,409,767 for cumulative payments. You can also see the other breakdown here with regard to the amounts of payments that were made. 46.7 were paid the max weekly benefit, and almost 40% were paid between the min and the max, and 13.63 were paid at the 95% rate below the minimum wage. And this slide is the weekly call volume. We're pleased to report that over the last 24 weeks, the program has experienced a sustained decrease in customer call volume, averaging 12%, while claims per day remained relatively constant. We believe this is a result of system and process enhancements we previewed for you earlier this year. These enhancements include the document dashboard, streamlining of pregnancy and bonding cases into a single case, more timely return of customer calls and portal messages, the addition of 5 and 10-day push text message reminders to customer smartphones, and insufficient documentation letters. Claim processing times have also improved to an average of 4.1 days to decision after receipt of all necessary documentation. And this slide is the customer service response time, and it shows the average percentages associated with the number of days to return those calls and messages. The year-to-date returned customer calls and messages, 96% of callbacks and messages have been returned within 1 to 3 business days. For July, 99% of calls and messages have been returned within 1 to 3 business days. And then we also have a new slide here. This slide is a recent addition to our reporting and illustrates customers' electronic filing, portal usage, and electronic communication. Web filing remains strong at 68% of claims filed. Opt-in for email and text messaging is very high in the 80% and 70% ranges, respectively. Portal messaging is a highly utilized mode of communicating for claimants. And also, Aflac IT has developed a beta administrative portal to enhance the authority's view into claimant case details and improve reporting. Benefits and operations team members have been providing feedback on this new portal to collaborate with Aflac on incremental improvements. And then beyond that, more to come on CTPL's redesigned website, which will launch soon. For claims, the website will feature a streamlined layout with easier access to improved claims filing and benefit information. We believe this will help in our efforts to educate claimants and to facilitate improved approval rates and lower denial rates as well. And that concludes the claims presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Molly, go right ahead.
Sure, thanks so much. I wanted to ask if we could go back to the slide that looks at claim denial rates, especially because I really appreciate seeing the broken out by the more recent data in addition to the cumulative. So it looks like now that we've had at least a little time for some of the innovations the authority has brought in to try and get that denial rate down, including updates to the portal. Even with some time for that to come in, it looks like the denial rate for the last 3 months is still at close to 30%. And I'm curious whether, which is high, and I know is something that the authority has been working to bring down for some time. So I'm curious whether there's an expectation that the changes that have already been made are going to bring that number down further, or is that something we need to continue looking at?
So I think there are a couple things with regard to that. Number one, I think the updated website will also be significant in helping to address that with improved and easier access to improved information on the website to help folks file. So we've been making extensive efforts over the course of the last year to try to enhance claimants' understanding of what the documentation requirements are, which is largely where the denials reside. In addition to that, and I have not really quantified this, but I think it is a bit of a factor. When you look at the differential in the bonding cases that were separate before and the high approval rates associated with those bonding cases, that also tends to compress the approval number a little bit as well and increase the denial numbers. So I think we've got a few things going on there. We certainly still have ongoing work with regard to trying to reduce those denial rates and enhance people's understanding of what the requirements are and help to facilitate that wherever we can.
Thank you, John. And just to add to that, we are also working with AFLAC to identify strategies to reach out to the claimants who are denied. The vast majority of denials are still related to insufficient documentation, with almost half where they don't provide anything, and then some where they provide something but not everything. So we're trying to figure out ways to address that, including pushing reminders, pushing sort of we don't know exactly what to call it, but sort of a, hey, you haven't given us your documents yet. We're going to give you an automatic extension, but be aware that if you don't get the documents in by the extension, it will be denied, because sometimes getting the denial prompts the documents. So we'd like to get the documents without the denial. And then also really reaching out and trying to understand, if they stopped the process without giving us documents, why? Did they realize that their employer was going to give them sufficient benefits, they didn't need to go through it? Were they experiencing difficulty getting the documents? What was actually happening, so we can try to tease out what were voluntary, sort of true abandoned claims versus what I would call involuntary, that they felt that they were experiencing obstacles and that's what prevented them from moving forward. So those are things we're going to try to do in the coming months to really try to get at that, because it's just, you know, we're trying to figure out why the outreach that we've done so far and why the improvements that we've made so far aren't showing more drastic changes in the numbers.
Thanks so much. Just to clarify something Erin said, so of the slightly under 30% of denied claims, it sounds like half of those are because there's no documentation at all submitted.
Yeah, so it's like 80. I don't have the exact numbers at my fingertips, but it's over 90%. John, tell me when I'm going wrong. Over 90% are no document issues, right? And about half of those document issues are no documents at all. So a little bit less than half of the actual denials are no documents at all.
Got it. So it sounds like a bunch of this is still figuring out, is it the documents weren't submitted because it's not a valid claim, or the documents weren't submitted because of a documents reason, and those require different solutions.
Exactly.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Any other questions for John? All right, seeing none. Thank you so much, John.
Okay, thank you.
So let's jump to our committee reports, and policy and personnel is up first. And I have Michael on behalf of Michael on my notes, which not sure exactly who's going to cover it, but let's have a Michael cover this particular item one way or the other.
Thank you, Alice. I'll avoid doing my guest impression and just give the report straight. The committee met early this month on August 1st. The group discussed the private plan policy revisions, as well as the proposed revisions of the finance and audit finance and accounting policies, which Dave and Joe just walked through a few minutes ago. The committee also discussed the time for future committee meetings, ultimately voting to move the start time of meetings from 9:15 to 9 o'clock. And that's 9 o'clock a.m. in case anyone's confused. So that's about it.
Great. Thank you. Molly, can I call on you for outreach and engagement, please?
Sure. The committee met end of last month, at which we heard some great outreach updates from Jessica and her team, as well as some quick legislative updates and some podcast updates. We are not planning to meet in August, but we'll reconvene in September.
Great, thank you. And Dave, on behalf of Holly, could you give us a quick update on the finance and then walk us through the finance documents, please?
Yes, so we received the actuarial analysis that Harindra went over earlier today. We also went over the proposed revisions of the finance and accounting policies that I went over earlier today. And we reviewed the June financials, which I will go over now, as long as with a preview of July. So with that, I will share my screen and we can get started.
We can see your screen, Dave.
Okay, thank you. Bear with me one moment, please. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're going over the financial results for June. So for the month of June, our expenses were $1,351,000. The expenditures for that were payroll and related expenses. We had 3 payroll periods in the month of June, where we typically only have 2. That usually happens about twice a year. So the payroll is about $868,000. That's higher than usual, but that's because we had an extra pay period. We also had outreach expenditures of $159,000. Most of our annual insurance expense was paid for the month of June. That was $138,000. We had our contact center of $128,000. So that makes up our expenditures for June. For the fiscal year ended June 30, our total expenditures were $11.6 million. So we were $5.4 million ahead of budget for the year. The income less expenses, we were ahead by $413,000. As I had mentioned previously, that's because we had $5 million less of an administrative fee, but that's not a revenue issue. As you may recall, that's because we had enough money in operating reserves to pay our expenditures. So we did not need to transfer the money from contributions to our operating reserves. Because we had enough in operating reserves, so we left the money in contributions to earn interest. But either way, we were ahead of budget for the year for operations. Talking about bond money, we spent $256,000 on bond expenditures. That was primarily on fund recovery and website redesign. We were slightly under budget for the month, but still ahead of budget by almost $3.7 million for the fiscal year end. And just to touch upon how much money we have left of bond money that's available to the authority, we have $2.8 million of bond money out of the $16 million that's been allocated thus far. Moving on. Oh, hold on one second. All right, moving on to our contribution activity for the month. So our net activity was $32.6 million. That was better than what we had budgeted by almost $5.5 million. The biggest driver of that was our benefits paid, which was 6.7 better than budget. For the month of June, we paid out $30.6 million of benefits. We paid out 5 weeks of benefits, so that's why that number may appear higher than normal for those of you who follow. Other variances where we had investment income of $2.1 million. So that's why that's better than budget, because we're earning a rate north of 5% now, and we have budgeted lower than that. Contribution revenue is negative because of the following. We did have contributions come in of $910,000. That was offset by refunds that went out of $961,000. Most of those refunds were for private plans, and they were refunds of multiple quarters for those private plans. The private plans, the employers that have private plans, even though they have private plans, we're still making contributions to the authority. So we did communicate with those employers and let them know that they were still making contributions. Sometimes the message doesn't quite get through when they have third-party payroll providers and they're on autopilot. So we've certainly let those employers know, and we have seen that many of them have subsequently stopped making the contributions to the authority. But in the meantime, we sent the contributions back to the employers and let them know that that's employee money and that they have to return it to the employees as well. So that's why there is a negative variance for the month of June. But again, having said that, we did have a positive variance overall. For the fiscal year ended, our activity was $115 million. That was $170 million better than what we budgeted. Again, that was primarily driven by the benefits paid being better than what we had budgeted way back then, because we didn't have, we only had a few months of activity at that time. There was also the $5 million administrative fee that we didn't transfer over that I had mentioned earlier. And the investment income that was better than budget. The contributions overall, as Erin had mentioned earlier, were less than we anticipated, but overall, it was still a positive effect into the fund and better than budget overall. The contribution fund on a cash basis has just a little over $498 million in the fund balance as of the end of June. And again, the two primary drivers of that are over $954 million of contribution revenue that we've been taking in since January of 2021, and just under $400 million of benefits paid out that we've been making since January of 2022. Brief look at our balance sheet. Our assets show just over $518 million of assets. The largest asset being the short-term investment fund, where most of the funds where most of the funds sit. That was for almost $486 million. I do want to note that our bond funds payable actually went down because we actually made our first payment towards the bond funds that are owed back to the state. That was approved by the board a month or so ago, and so we'll be making that payment. That was the first of 10 payments that we'll be making over time. Quick preview of July. Our expenditures were almost $800,000. Typical expense categories. The benefits we paid out were over $26.7 million. As Erin had noted, we are seeing the benefit of the weekly benefits being paid out start to increase over the last few weeks. We have had some record highs, and so for the month of July, the average was about $6.7 million a week. So we're monitoring that and seeing if that's a trend that's going to continue. Flip side, on the money coming in, our contributions for July were $110 million. That's because contributions are due at the end of June. There's a grace period in July. So as you might imagine, most employers wait till July to pay. So that's why the number is large. That number also includes a smaller amount of penalties and interest because we started assessing penalties and interest effective back in May. And so those payments were coming in July as well. And the investment income was $2.1 million. So those were our financial results for July as well as June. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Dave? All right, great. Thank you so much. Aaron, I'm ready to turn it over to you for your CEO report.
Thank you so much, Alice. A couple things I just wanted to mention. First, we'd like to welcome Janae Woods Weber. She is the designee for Comptroller Sean Scanlon. So this is her first board meeting. We're really thrilled to have her. Janae is the executive director of the Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund, QUELF. And she's been a longtime supporter of the paid leave. QUELF is always a huge advocate and worked very hard to get our legislation passed. So having Janae participate with us is wonderful. As you recall, Comptroller and Treasurer's Office have non-voting positions on the board, but we really appreciate their involvement and their expertise that they share in these board meetings. So we're so happy that Janae is filling that role for us. So thank you for coming on board, Janae. Additionally, as Dave mentioned, we've been working on the fund recovery efforts. The notices of penalties and interest went out earlier this summer, which prompted a lot of response. We had a huge spike in our Contact Us case volume, not surprisingly. Somehow sending a bill prompts people to pay attention when sending kind, gentle reminders and information sometimes doesn't. So we're recovering money owed from Q1. We're recovering money owed from previous quarters. We're also getting a lot more information about some of the folks who'd never paid any contributions to us, but were on our books. Sometimes they're on our books because their third-party payroll registered them or enrolled them, even though they don't have employees in Connecticut. Some of them had employees in Connecticut, but don't have them any longer. And so one of the benefits of this fund recovery effort is we're cleaning up our data. We're learning who is not really an employer in Connecticut any longer, so we can take them off of our non-compliant list and put them into inactive status. So it's been a lot of work, but it will continue to be a lot of work, candidly, but it's actually really helpful, not only for the money that we're getting, but for the cleanup. And so it's just spare a moment to think about our fund recovery team, because they've had a really busy summer, as have our partners at United Way, who are getting a lot of the unidentified Contact Us cases that actually turn into fund recovery cases. So it's been a lot. It will continue to be a lot, but it's good work. And we will be sending out Q2 non-compliance notices later in the month. So we expect a little bit of a spike, but we're hoping to get our backlog down before we send those out. And then finally, we've mentioned the website a few times in the past. We are cautiously optimistic that we will be able to launch by the end of the month. There are some integrations that we need to work through. They're not completely within our control, so we're working closely with the good folks at BITS, which is the part of DAS that handles IT for the state, as well as our vendor. We have a go, no go at the end of next week in terms of whether we think we can launch on the 30th. Hopefully we will be able to. If not, it'll be very soon thereafter. Once we have that go, no go, we'll be sharing some information with everybody about kind of the sitemap and what things will look like. We have increased the content of our website, I would say at least 3 to 4 times. There's just so much more information that will be available on the website. We're also putting it in ways that we think will be easier for folks to find, to navigate. So we're really looking forward to it launching. Really can't wait. And so that's coming down the pike as well. And we'll keep you all informed about when that actually goes live. We'll see us all be very, very relieved when that happens. So that is my update for today, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Any questions for Aaron? Great. Well, thank you, Aaron, and to the team for all your continued hard work. Do we have any old business today? Do we have any new business today? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you. And the second from Andrea. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. I assume no one is opposed and no one is abstaining. The motion carries, and we're going to call our meeting to adjournment at 10:22 a.m. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.